This time, Herbert Chapman's Huddersfield Town. The pyramid starts to invert.
Because I'll stay a wild rover forever and more.
Hello and welcome to By Far the Greatest Team, a podcast in which football fans attempt the impossible to rank once and for all who is the greatest team of all time. My name is Graham Dunn. Put in and crowbar mentions of Headington United, where they aren't welcome. And joining me as ever, it's our data guru, Jamie Rooney.
Yeah, you've beat me to it. I had a couple of points of order, and in fairness, you know me so well, so I was going to challenge you to get Oxford United into this one because we've covered some really important teams in the history of football. But I think this one is going to be good. I think this really is going back to the birth of many things, including, I think, the football manager. I don't think the football manager existed until this team came into shape. And I'm going to warn you now, Graham, I'm wearing my Senegal top for obvious reasons. African champions 2026. If you do say anything that I feel is upsetting me, I will walk off.
You should correctly take your lead. I did think that might be a Senegal shirt. Very impressive. Very good. Yes, we are going right back to the birth of the game. And I should flag at this point, there are two key things about it. One, this is a really early days football story. And secondly, as the inverting the pyramid reference reflects, there's quite a bit of tactical stuff around this story. So you won't be hearing very much from me over the course of the next hour. You're very glad to hear that. We are offering James some proper reinforcements on this. So we welcome back Phil Craig. Hi, Phil.
Hello, Graham. Hi, Jamie. Glad to be back. A bit of a whistle-stop tour from North Korea to North America and now West Yorkshire.
Definitely so. As we said, we are going back to kind of the birth of football, Huddersfield Town. Phil, why you made sense on this is that you've kind of touched on this story from the end position. If we think of this as a three-parter, we've kind of done it the wrong way because we've begun with the Arsenal Stadium mystery.
Yeah, the great movie.
Which is it's kind of the highlight of this story, isn't it?
It is. And, well, without giving too much away, it didn't actually include the main protagonist we're going to talk about today, Herbert Chapman. But yeah, you're right. I think it was about 13 months ago we touched on Arsenal and their success in the 1930s, including the starring role for the team and their then manager after Herbert Chapman in the Great Arsenal Stadium Mystery, possibly the greatest sports movie ever produced.
Truly one of a kind. With Herbert Chapman and Huddersfield Town, I mean, Phil, where would you begin this story? Where do you think how far back do we need to go?
I guess we're going to start right at the beginning, which is 1908, where the Huddersfield, the football club, were formed. So fairly recently in football terms. So, Huddersfield, probably better known for its cotton mills, textile production, and being the birthplace of rugby league. So you can trace organised rugby back to the 1840s in Huddersfield, with what's now known as Huddersfield Giants, who were founded in 1864, so well before the football team. And in fact, Huddersfield were one of a small group of Yorkshire and Lancashire clubs who broke away from the Rugby Football Union in 1895 over disputes around professionalism of the game. And they were founding members of the Northern Rugby Football Union, which later became the Rugby Football League, winning a number of Challenge Cups before the First World War and just afterwards as well. So really, the football club came late, and I mean, we'll probably kind of touch on this through the discussion, but was probably the number 2 sport within Huddersfield right from the very beginning.
Jamie, at this stage, is there a sort of divisional structure? How many divisions are we talking at that stage?
Yeah, in 1908, there's 2 divisions in the English Football League. Within the next 13 years, there will be a Division 3, which was primarily the Southern League, which was a highly competitive football league. And by 2021, I think it was, the Southern League had become the third division with a few additional teams in it as well. So just in the early stages, Huddersfield themselves were not really a team that did anything of note really in the early part of their time. But they soon go on to do some pretty good things in a very short space of time. For a young football club, they achieve, well, I'd say they overachieve for a young football club.
I mean, so they do make it to the top flight relatively early?
Yeah, I guess so. They'd had some success before the war, the Great War.
That's a really important point, Phil. They're, in their early existence, there is a pretty big interruption where football isn't being played. Yes, so that's a very good point to make.
So you're right. So this new football club gained election to the Football League, the second division, as Jamie mentioned, in 1910. Had some success before the First World War, finishing fifth, which is a place above Herbert Chapman's Leeds City in 1913. But then, of course, there's an assassination in Sarajevo and the world goes to pot. After the end of the First World War, the league schedule was returned to its normal status, again with Huddersfield Town in Division 2. This is 1919-20. And Huddersfield Town are promoted to Division 1 and actually reached the FA Cup final as well, losing to Aston Villa in extra time. And they did this despite, there's a couple of major obstacles they had to overcome. First, selling their star forward, Jack Cock, who I found out was the first Cornishman to play for England. He was transferred out to Chelsea.
And Jack Cock was also probably one of the earliest footballers turned film stars as well. So he was in the 1920s. He actually starred in a couple of films, The Winning Game, to just name one. Yeah, so he was already a B-list celebrity off the football pitch.
Were we talking to with Stu Burgess about surprisingly few Cornishmen who have played international football? Is Nigel Martin a Cornishman, or am I thinking something else?
It could be, or Devon. He's down that way, isn't he? But I'm not sure. There's not many of them, and my extensive research indicated, as well as being a film star, Jack Cock was the first Cornishman to play for England. So it was quite a big deal, kind of going to Chelsea. They got a bit of money in, but he was by far their kind of star player.
Yeah, £1,500, 1,500, which in 1919, I think it was a massive amount of money for a football transfer.
Yeah.
The game's gone mad, they were saying.
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, there's other similarities. There's big money in football, and there's also kind of behind the scenes kind of crises involving chairmen as well. So some things never really change. So the chairman of Town, Hilton Crowther, who unsurprisingly was a wealthy mill owner in Huddersfield, he had big ambitions for the club. He wanted to kind of finance an expansion to a 50,000 spectator stadium. And it was ambitious because even on a good day, Huddersfield were getting less than 5,000. The rugby league team could get 10 times as many supporters as Town. So taking a bit of a straw and frustrated at the lack of support, in 1919, so just after the war, he resigned, demanded a repayment of £25,000 that he'd invested in the club. Or even if he didn't do this, he planned to kind of force a merger with the newly formed Leeds United. And we'll touch on why it's Leeds United here rather than Leeds City, as I mentioned earlier on, a little bit later on. So we're kind of getting a roll back to the kind of Thames Valley Royals days, aren't we?
Yeah, I love it.
But his actions in terms of pretty much blackmailing the town of Huddersfield to merge their club with their not so far away neighbours Leeds really galvanised the town, because there clearly was a feeling that they didn't want the brilliantly named Hilton Crowther, I have to say, taking their football team away. So I think it's one of the early instances of fan control, Phil. I think they raised shares to allow fans to buy an interest in the football club to try to get and raise the 25,000 ransom that Crowther had placed on the club's head.
Yeah, the fans really stepped up, raising funds, getting a stake in the club, but also kind of turning up. So from under 5,000 by Christmas and the visit of Rotherham County at this point, not too far away. There were 26,000 in the ground for that. And later in an FA Cup tie against Liverpool, they had 48,000. And this was a bit of a catalyst. It kind of forced the chairman to kind of backtrack. He settled himself for a further kind of block of shares in the club and a payment of 17,500 as well.
So things have reached a turning point at Huddersfield. Herbert Chapman, what's he been doing?
Well, where to start with Herbert Chapman? This could be a long pod if we kind of go into Herbert Chapman. So
let's do it, Phil. Come on, you got this.
Yeah.
Oh, well, where his playing career, there's not a huge amount to talk about.
That doesn't last long.
It's pretty unspectacular, really, isn't it? Well, quite interesting for the time, really. So he'd had a pretty unspectacular playing career. He'd moved around a lot, and there's always a bit of a tension with Herbert Chapman at this point. He largely kind of played as an amateur, playing for Spurs, but still as an amateur, even at that point, because he always had his engineering background to fall back onto. He was quite an educated individual, and he had mining engineering kind of qualifications. And even when he was a kind of an amateur, he'd still be kind of working at a local mine or a local factory to kind of keep himself going and to kind of top up his wages. So yeah, pretty unspectacular, but well thought of within the game. And it wasn't long before he kind of moved into management, including with Northampton Town. And at this point, he started to kind of make a bit of an impact. So at Northampton Town, winning the kind of Southern League title in 1909. And at this point, you're starting to get the first embryonic kind of vision of where Chapman is kind of going. So even at Northampton, he was known for kind of having a more organised style of football, more counter-attacking football compared to the kind of very direct football, the packed forward lines, and the relatively loose kind of tactical shape which most managers or coaches or secretaries of kind of football clubs had at the time, where there was less focus on kind of coaching and organisation and more on physicality, stamina and bravery, really kind of just getting stuck in. Although that hasn't really changed that much, has it, really? In 1912, with no obvious route into Football League for Northampton, there wasn't any kind of automatic promotion or relegation from the Southern League. Chapman was offered the chance to manage a second division Leeds City at this point, who had finished 19th in the season before he joined. And there was an immediate improvement in the form of Leeds City. So they finished 6th in 1913 and 4th in 1914, just 2 places outside of promotion. Before, of course, the Football League was suspended with the outbreak of war.
Yes, and then during the war, obviously the league stops, and so Chapman does he actually return to Leeds at this point? Because obviously events at Leeds then kind of get overtaken as well.
Yeah, this becomes important later on because Leeds City do continue to play in regional competitions during the war, and they're relying largely on guest players to replace the men who are fighting in the war. At the same time, Chapman totally stepped away from the club and he took a position as a manager. So he's kind of falling back onto his engineering background. He's a manager in a munitions factory.
And I mean, there is no Leeds City now, as far as I know. So what happened?
So Chapman did rejoin Leeds City, or tried to rejoin Leeds City at the end of the war, but he resigned suddenly in December 1918, shortly before the club was accused of financial irregularities. There was a player, a whistleblower effectively, who I think was sold to kind of Coventry, but at the point he was sold, he kind of spilled the beans, or at least he made allegations that illegal payments were being made to kind of guest players. And of course, this is during the war, and at the point at which there was a kind of cap in terms of how much players could be kind of played. So as a result, in 1919, the club was ejected from the Football League and completely dissolved. All of the players were auctioned off at this point. This is a long way before any kind of Bosman. They were just kind of auctioned off to the highest bidder. And 5 club officials, including Chapman, were at this point banned from football for life, which meant that Chapman, as he'd probably done as a kind of player as much as anything, he kind of fell back onto his engineering background and his technical knowledge, and he started work at a coke works in Selby, in North Yorkshire.
Do you think that's what first attracted George Graham to the job at Leeds?
No comment.
But seriously, so Chapman is out of the game, and then the Huddersfield opportunity comes up, and that's his kind of way back in. It is.
It's so it's a bit unfortunate, really. I mean, the manager of the club who got them to promotion and also to the FA Cup final was a chap called Ambrose Langley.
Another
great Ambrose Langley, yeah.
Hilton Crowther and Ambrose Langley. I mean, these are characters from a spy novel, surely. These are fantastic names.
Yeah. It does sound good, doesn't it? He'd had a really successful career, really, including winning the Football League title with the Wednesday in 1903, in 1904.
Yeah.
Wednesday, interestingly, fell short in 1905, finishing ninth. If they'd been successful in 1905, they would have been the first team. There's a bit of foreshadowing here. They could have been the first team to have won the league championship or the first division 3 times in a row. But instead, and this is perhaps the biggest shock, Newcastle won the league title. In fact, Newcastle might have been the first double winners as well, but they lost the FA Cup final to 2-0 to Aston Villa. So got them into the first division, got them to a cup final, and actually Langley and Huddersfield started really well in 1920-21 season. They were winning 5 of their opening 6 matches. But then after that, they started to stumble. They won just 1 of 12 of the next 12 games. And with Christmas approaching, the club was close to the relegation places, which is when the board felt that Langley needed a bit of extra help, and they reached out to Herbert Chapman. But of course, to reach out and get Herbert Chapman in as assistant, they had to get his ban overtaken.
Yes, so they succeed in managing that. They're essentially able to argue that Chapman wasn't actually at the club at the time.
No. So he was in somewhere, a munitions factory somewhere else. So, and there's even pictures of the team at the time, the Leeds City team, and he's just not there in the team photos before games. He's physically not there because he's in a munitions factory. So, but I think it was like the 3rd attempt before he got the ban overturned.
And Chapman does get his way back. Now, he comes in sort of as assistant, pretty quickly takes over the prime job. But
Phil, I don't know, have you got it there, what Ambrose Langley wanted to go off and do? So manager of Huddersfield Town, who's just brought in Herbert Chapman as assistant, resigns. And Phil, do you know why he resigned?
I know that he got a bit of a payoff and he started a pub in Sheffield. I don't know if that was his intention.
He went to run a pub. Yeah.
Yeah.
He went to run a pub. That was his choice. Yeah. Brilliant, isn't it? I mean, it just tells you where the money was back then. You could probably earn more running your local pub or your pub than you could managing one of England's top flight football teams.
Langley must have known the writing was on the wall for him as well, because Chapman was initially appointed as assistant in February 1921, but Chapman's salary was £10 a week, which is £4 more than Langley, and he was invited to all the board meetings. So Langley might have thought, really, the longevity of this particular appointment could be, it's going to make a Manchester United caretaker manager's appointment seem kind of long term,
It's certainly sounding a little bit like Ambrose Langley is very much the Roy Evans to Herbert Chapman's Gerard Houllier.
It's also important just to set a little bit of context. In 1921, when Chapman is succeeding Ambrose Langley as the manager of Huddersfield, I think it was 1921. The football manager, as we know it, is nothing like what we know it today. The football manager didn't really exist. You were almost a club secretary. The football team was generally picked by the directors or board members, and they would just tell the club secretary in the guise of a manager to get the boys ready. But yeah, so the football manager as we know it is not a football manager. It's an administrator. There's no tactics involved. There's no operating players. There's no running the club from top to bottom in the classic sense that somebody like Sir Alex Ferguson would have done at Aberdeen and Manchester United. The expectation of Herbert Chapman's role was to make sure that his players were physically fit, because physicality was the most important thing, and pretty much nothing else. And he would be given a team sheet in terms of this is the team that's going to face Arsenal or Liverpool or Wolverhampton Wanderers on that given weekend.
It's quite interesting as well, isn't it, in terms of the way that we talk about managers or head coaches and everything today. And Ruben Amorim, I thought, was really interesting in kind of that differentiation between his role as a manager or being kind of considered as a coach. When in the world of kind of technical directors and sporting directors, it wasn't that kind of complicated 100 years ago, but there was a clear differentiation between the administration and governance of the club, match day organisation, player recruitment and kind of contracts, and then team selection, tactics, managing staff and discipline were broken down. But it was interesting that I think when Chapman is appointed as Huddersfield manager, he was manager secretary, which seems to indicate that his role kind of straddled both the administration but also the kind of the management of the club and the team.
Yeah, and this was normal in English football for a long time as well. Just to kind of give you a bit more context, Walter Winterbottom, the first official England national team football manager, who was succeeded by Sir Alf Ramsey in the mid-60s, he rarely ever selected players. He was just given the squad. He was given the team sheet by the FA, and his role was just to make sure he looked like a manager on the sidelines, I guess, because his involvement was little else. You couldn't do any substitutions. We know from the Hungary stuffing, there was no tactics involved. So this is Herbert Chapman in 1921. In 1963, it's still roughly the same in the English FA.
Now, things don't let me, there's no quick fire success here, is there? And Phil, I think you suggest he might have been lucky to retain his job by modern day standards.
Yeah, going to go back to his first half season, or even less than half season, 1920-21. Results, if anything, were worse after Chapman's promotion. They had 5 consecutive defeats across February and March, including an FA Cup exit against Aston Villa, leaving Town in 18th place, just 3 places above the relegation zone. However, there was an upturn in form towards the end of the season, and Town won 7 of the final 10 matches. They eventually ended up in their first season back, so, it's not easy being in your first season in the top division. They finished 17th out of 22 teams. But there is one particularly significant signing that takes place in that season, and that's the signing from Aston Villa of Clement Stevenson, who, to follow the advert, was born in Blyth, but was made a footballer, first of all at Blyth Spartans, the famous amateur teams, Durham City, before joining Aston Villa in 1910 and winning the FA Cup in 1913. A big victory because it was over the top team of the time in 1913 against the league champion Sunderland. And he also later won the FA Cup in 1920, which was his last game for the club, with a victory over Langley's and Huddersfield that we've mentioned. It was a big money signing for the time, but he brought a huge amount of experience. I think he came when he was around 31. He was a canny kind of inside forward and playmaker as well. He was perfect for Chapman's kind of counter-attacking game that he was looking to develop over the next few years.
I was just going to flavour it a little bit because at the time Chapman had a pretty young, inexperienced team. So I think what Chapman was doing was finding the right blend of experience. So again, it's just an indicator of a guy who is in tune with how he wants to shape a winning football team.
It's just looking at his stats, and Stevenson's played 192 games for Aston Villa, and then plays another 246 for Huddersfield over the starting when he's 31, in the final 8 years. I would say, he had 4 years off because of the war, but there was a war. It's not like he was able to go on a 4-year fitness camp at high altitude Oxygen or whatever.
He kind of served during the war, but we'll probably touch on some of the other players who had actually kind of served at the front line during the war. Stevenson was slightly more fortunate. He'd worked in a munitions factory and later joined the Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve towards the end of the war. But most of the time he was kind of spent as a physical training instructor at Crystal Palace. At the point at which he was demobilised in 1919, he'd seen service, but it'd been less on the front line and more kind of making sure the soldiers were fit.
I'm now obsessed by Clem Stevenson, and I particularly enjoy on his Wikipedia. It says managed by Herbert Chapman, who saw qualities beyond Stevenson's well-renowned lack of pace, brackets, citation needed. So, so I have no idea how renowned it is. That seems quite harsh.
Yeah. I think of him now as a kind of latter-day Granit Xhaka, really kind of controlling the midfield.
Yeah, I think that's a great kind of description of what he was. He was a baller, I think, Graham. He played in a position, the inside right, I think it was, where he was able just to spray those wonderful passes into the spaces for those young, eager footballers to run onto and run up the goal tally. Baller, Clem Stevenson. Brilliant name as well. Again, I mean, this is a theme, isn't it?
So Stevenson joins. Does that sort of kickstart things the following season?
Yeah, I'd say so. 21-22. There's a couple of indications of where Chapman wants to take the Town, and he starts some kind of really kind of quite canny recruitment. One of the first players he signs is Sam Woodsworth, who was a left back. He has a kind of quite an interesting kind of war career. He'd lied about his age and had gone to war at 19. And like many of the players we might kind of touch on, he'd actually returned physically and kind of mentally damaged, including having a shrapnel wound in his ankle while he served in the Royal Garrison Artillery, which I think was described as the footballers' garrison, because it had so many players, including practically the whole kind of Leyton Orient team, I think, as part of it. He kind of came back from the war, was released by Blackburn, but then went back into the Lancashire leagues and rebuilt his career at a team called Nelson before kind of joining Huddersfield in 1921. So from kind of being injured and thrown out at Blackburn, he goes on, has a great career at Huddersfield, has 281 games plus 9 caps for England. I think what he's doing here is kind of spotting talent, perhaps where it's kind of being overlooked, including by kind of looking at the kind of the amateur leagues as well. So another key player was George Brown, Bomber Brown as he was described, who was a centre forward. He'd been signed from Mickley Colliery team in Northumberland for £75, which is a bit of a bargain because he went on to score 142 goals and 213 appearances before being sold to Aston Villa later for £5,000. So he's bringing in kind of players from non-league as well as developing the kind of the youth team as well. He appointed a kind of ex-coach, which wasn't often done, a kind of ex-coach to kind of come in and help with the reserve team. So by the time they were kind of working in the reserve team, they were developing and kind of growing as players, but also came into the first team and knew how Chapman wanted them to play it as well. And the final innovation that I kind of quite liked as well with Chapman was before 1921-22 season, they had a pre-season tour, not nothing like kind of Dallas Tornadoes, but they had a pre-season tour to Paris and against Red Star, Olympiacos and Clapton Orient as well, the glamour teams of the time. They're ahead of its time, really.
Just thinking back to that kind of battalion that had all the Leyton Orient players, you'd feel sorry if you were the Germans during the First World War and you made a nice Christmas Day truce to go out and play a nice little kickabout, and out come the Leyton Orient first team.
That's right.
Well, hang on. So the 21-22 season, how does that go?
Starts off pretty well. Got themselves into the top 6, so really building momentum. But then they lost 11 of 17 games over Christmas, and you finished in mid-table by the end, 14th place. But it might be potentially that they might have lost a little bit of ground because their mind was elsewhere, perhaps.
Yes, so they're doing well in the FA Cup. They got to the final a couple of years previously, so it's not kind of completely new territory for them, but they go one step further this year.
Yeah, it was pretty tough round by round. First round, they had to beat Burnley, who were league champions, in a replay. Second round, they beat Brighton, again 2-0 after a replay. Third round, Blackburn Rovers, 5-0, again after a replay. Fourth round, more straightforward. They beat Millwall Athletic 3-0. Semi-finals beat Notts County 3-1 before their first major trophy which is pretty remarkable because they'd only been founded 14 years before this, and they're winning a major trophy. But they beat Preston North End 1-0 in the final. It was a bit of a controversial penalty. Smith slotted it home, and one of my favourite bits of information I found, I think it's true. The Smith beat James Mitchell, who's in goal for Preston North End, and he was wearing spectacles as well. A goalkeeper with glasses on, which is kind of quite a thing. At Stamford Bridge, which was the last final at Stamford Bridge before the move over to Wembley, I think.
Jamie, at what point does this kind of tactical revolution kick in? Are we seeing it at this stage, or is that a later thing?
No, Chapman did it from the start. I think Chapman wanted to assume control of the whole running of the football team from the start. He definitely started looking at implementing tactics across his team. And I think you see that with the signing of Clem Stevenson. I think that's a sign of intent from Chapman's point of view. He wants to blend a bit of experience with the youngsters in the squad. So I think at this point, Chapman's already way ahead of the rest, because he's thinking like a football manager when the rest are just thinking like football secretaries generally, or don't have the remit that Chapman was lucky enough to have at Huddersfield this time, to have a bit of rope to do things that his contemporaries couldn't do.
Yeah. And there's some suggestion in the final against Preston North End that normally the structure would be 2-3-5, so very heavily weighted kind of forward player.
Yeah.
There's some suggestion that the centre half, Tom Wilson, is pulled further back. So you're getting kind of closer to a 3-2-2-3, which became explicit later on when he went to Arsenal in the famous WM formation. It's not consistent as it might have been later on, but there's the slightest hint that it's starting to take place very early on at Huddersfield.
Yeah, he's playing around with the lines. So football at this point, absolutely on point to your inverting the pyramid comment at the very top of this, Graham. It's 2-3-5, two defenders, full-backs. Then you've got your three in the middle, and then you've got your forwards in the line of five. And yeah, Phil, you're absolutely right. Chapman's already playing with the lines. He's creating four lines as opposed to the three. And he's putting in what we know as a centre-half. A centre-half was effectively part of a three-man midfield. And he's pulling that centre-half into the defence to almost invent the central defender.
And we're quite sure this is deliberate, and he's just not badly coaching the centre-half.
With hindsight, yeah.
I was like, that worked quite well. Maybe I'll stick with it.
Yeah, we've had a few defenders like that at Sunderland a few years ago. Yeah.
The following season, they go is almost like a dress rehearsal for what's to come, isn't it? Because they go quite well in the 22-23 season, but not quite close enough.
That's right. It kind of follows the same kind of pattern, I think. A further investment in the team, brought in, for example, Charlie Wilson, centre forward from Tottenham, went on to score 57 goals in 99 appearances. Also developed young talent into the team. Roy Goodall was a defender. He went on to play 403 games for Town over 16 years, 25 games for England, and he would have been the captain of the England team had they decided to enter the World Cup in 1930. But as we know, they didn't, and he wasn't. But nonetheless, he had a very successful career at Huddersfield Town, and he's kind of gradually brought in by Chapman in the 2023 season.
And this all plays into your previous question, Graham. Was Chapman doing anything different? And this is squad building, and he's squad building with a purpose. And what he's also got, he's got the reserves and the youth team playing in his same system as well. So this is new. This isn't happening anywhere else in the world of football right now. He's spending money, which is something we're very accustomed with. And he's doing this in an era where it wasn't really that popular to spend the chairman's money, because the chairman liked the gate receipts in his own personal pocket.
I mean, they finished quite close, don't they? They almost win it.
Yeah, they were close. They had a bit of a modest start to the season. We're in mid-table in November, but then results really took a turn for the better following a 4-0 win over Birmingham City on Boxing Day. Huddersfield were up to third, and they stayed in the top three for most of the rest of the 22-23 season, conceding just 3 goals in the last 12 games. So Chapman's got them organised and playing well. They ended up finishing third. So that's a significant improvement, I think. They were 7 points off Liverpool, who retained their title. Sunderland were second, interestingly enough. But the thing that really struck me about that season, other than Sunderland's great performance, was that Huddersfield were a very difficult team to beat. They let in 32 goals in 42 matches. Only Liverpool were better than that, and they had 23 clean sheets.
So Herbert Chapman's already had a fair bit of success, but things really start to come together the following season, and we'll go through how close that season was after the break. So welcome back. Now, Herbert Chapman at Huddersfield Town. They have had a successful 22-23 season. They take that form into the following season. Now, they're right up there, but they've got some competition up there, haven't they?
They have, yeah. It's interesting, quite an interesting season. They had a pretty inconsistent start of the season, including a loss to Middlesbrough, of all teams, who went on to be kind of relegated. By the end of October, Huddersfield Town had found their rhythm, and they briefly kind of topped the table. And they were always in the kind of basically in a 3 or 4 horse race throughout kind of the following kind of months. Cardiff in particular, but also Sunderland were up there as well. Any excuse to mention that.
Two things that really strike me when I look through that Huddersfield Town record for that season. One is that they only have 5 goal scorers. That is just extraordinary, isn't it? Five goal scorers across the season is just insane. So all their goals are scored by either Clem Stevenson, who you mentioned before, George Brown, George Cook, Billy Smith, or Charlie Wilson. So that's quite bizarre, isn't it?
It is. I mean, they're pretty well organised, I would say. Pretty consistent as well. Physically fit, so there's not the kind of turnover, despite some of the brutality of the games. There wasn't the same kind of turnover of players as there might have been at other clubs. Fewer injuries. I think there was more of an emphasis on physical fitness and also kind of stamina. I think there was a greater emphasis on tactics, which meant the team was much more kind of consistent as well. It knew how to play and how it wanted to play.
The other thing really strikes me but it struck you. The one who spotted this, and it is fantastic. So I can see there's like a Christmas doubleheader. That wasn't that unusual, was there? You know, they travelled to Spurs on Christmas Day, and then Spurs come to Huddersfield Town on Boxing Day. But that's not the only doubleheader, is it?
The whole season is littered with doubleheaders, pretty much. I mean, it's a case of you're playing the same club week 1 and you're playing the same club week 2, and that just kind of repeats itself. Now, it does vary, and this had been going on since football had resumed after the Great War, and I think it possibly might be something to do with easing fixture congestion or allowing fans to travel more efficiently. I'm not really sure, but I don't know. Is the answer. But yeah, double headers were a thing.
Presumably they stopped it because of feistiness and stuff carrying over from one week to another. You would imagine that would just intensify stuff, but
it does. I mean, I think this is the 22-23 season. I think this is like the last season where it's kind of like so blatantly obvious. I think it does kind of calm down after that point.
Is it possible that the first fixture computer was developed in 1923?
Yeah.
Before that, it was just some guy. I'm only doing it once.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's super efficient though, isn't it? It's like, well, I'm not going to work this out. Let's just put them to play each other again.
Reg, do you think we could mix it up a bit next season? Always done it this way.
Yeah. Don't break
I've got a system. So Huddersfield win their first game. In fact, they win their first 2. But as you mentioned, a slightly sort of tricky start to this. They're always there in the mix. They're sort of fractioning off the pace, aren't they?
They are a little bit. Yeah, they kind of get to the top of the table in October. Nice 1-0 win over Birmingham. Stevenson kind of scoring again, and they're there or thereabouts for the rest of the season. Really, first, second, third, or fourth. There was a bit of a fixture kind of backlog, I think, and on many occasions, Huddersfield fell backwards, less because of the results that they had, although they do have a little bit of a wobble over the new year, but it's more actually the other clubs have played more games. And as you kind of get towards the end of the season, Sunderland in particular had played 3 or 4 more games than Cardiff and Huddersfield as well. So it didn't, sometimes the league positions didn't kind of reflect the amount of points that you've got per game.
Sunderland just slowly miss out towards the end, as Phil probably painfully just said or wants not to say. And then we're getting into the crux, and it's still advantage Cardiff City, who have been primarily the front runner for the whole of the season. They have a little drop off, but they recover.
Yeah, well, I mean, looking at it, ahead of the last game, Huddersfield only win 1 in 7.
Yeah.
They draw a whole bunch, and actually they lose their penultimate game, don't they, against Aston Villa, 3-1. And so that presumably put Cardiff City in the box seat going into the last game.
Yeah, it really does. So Cardiff City, it's a 42-game English First Division season. Cardiff City have played 41 games and they have 56 points. Huddersfield Town in second place have played 41 games and they have 55 points. Cardiff are going to Birmingham to play Birmingham City at St Andrews, and Huddersfield are at home to Nottingham Forest. Now, back in 1923-24, if teams finished level on points, goal average was the decider. In fact, goal average remained the decider right through to 1976, when it then moved to, in 1977 season, it moved to goal difference, which makes a lot more sense. So goal average is basically goals scored divided by goals conceded, and then whatever that score is, the greater of that score will be the deciding factor. Now, none of this matters if Cardiff win. If Cardiff win against Birmingham City, bearing in mind Birmingham City have got nothing to play for. They're quite low in the division. They can't get relegated. They're safe. They're in the top division for the next season. They can't qualify for Europe because European competitions haven't been invented. So they've got nothing really to play for. And Huddersfield, they have to beat Nottingham Forest, but they have to beat them at least by 3 goals because of the goal average is in Cardiff's favour. Cardiff have a better goal average going into this game. And for Huddersfield to overcome that, it's super, super tight. I mean, it's so tight. This has the potential of becoming the most tightest title race in the history of the English game. It kind of sets it up. Phil, have I missed anything crucial there? Because I feel that, we didn't have Sky Sports in 1924. So I think we need to be doing the modern day equivalent of building this title race up in black and white.
Yeah, kind of having an Aguero moment in black and white 100 years ago. So really, you've set it up really well, Jamie. The title, after 41 or 42 games, turned on a 10-minute spell in the second half of each game. So at the same time as Huddersfield Town went 2-0 up at home to Nottingham Forest, Cardiff are awarded a penalty. 2 players decided that they weren't going to take the penalty. They declined to take it before Len Davis stepped up, but his penalty kick was saved.
Was it a Panenka?
I haven't seen. I hope not. I hope not. It would be good if it was, but there's no evidence to say that it was. Yeah,
we should point out for historical purposes, the Panenka penalty didn't actually come into being until 1976 when Panenka scored the first Panenka. But it was so the Davis penalty, apparently it was pathetic. He didn't kick anything through it. And it feels to me, reading newspaper reports, that the goalkeeper took a walk to collect the ball. It had that much lack of power in it. You're playing for the title. You're playing for the title. It wouldn't happen in this day, would it? Somebody missing a penalty in the last minute playing for a title? That would never happen.
So Cardiff missed this all-important penalty.
Yeah. And then further up the what was to become the M1, not the M1 at the moment, further north, at Leeds Road, 10 minutes after that safe penalty, Ted Richardson, who was only making it was his first appearance of the season for Huddersfield Town. He freed George Bomber Brown, who ran on to score for Huddersfield. So the win for Huddersfield, 3-0.
And Cardiff, it's 1-1. Presumably, they got their mobile phones, so they've got their wireless, their little transistor radio next to the crowd, are hearing the score from Ninian Park, and are just checking what.
This is really fascinating, and I know Phil's going to provide a bit of light to how communications were operating back in 1924 in this title decider between Leeds Road and St Andrews, where these two key games are going on. But this is fascinating because the first radio commentary didn't even happen in England until 1927. So this predates radio. We are actually in the era of the telegram and the telephone. And I think Phil can put some light into this, that the telephone maybe played a part. But I just like to think that, if you just picture the scene, you've got these two critical games going on. You've got no radio updates. You've got no live ticker. You've basically got people with scraps of paper running from one place to another, spreading the word of mouth of what's going on in these two games. It's just, a bloke in a flat cap flipping numbers on a board.
Is Huddersfield is that the land of pigeon fancying? Would that be a thing? Would a carrier pigeon be sent off?
It could have taken a little bit too long. It's a nice idea, though. I like the idea. But yeah, just to kind of emphasise, though. So I'm looking at the top of the table now. Sunderland unlucky and very unlucky in third place, 53 points. Cardiff and Huddersfield, 57 points each. Huddersfield have won one more game. They've won 23 games, drawn 11. Lost 8. Cardiff won 22, drawn 13, lost 7. Hardly anything in it. But the key point is, and remember that Cardiff have missed a penalty and drawn 0-0. Goals for Cardiff City, 61. Goals against 34. Huddersfield goals for 60. Goals against 33. And if you do the mental maths, the goal average for Huddersfield is 1.818. And Cardiff City 1.794. So that's, 0.02 of a goal average difference between the two clubs, which means that Huddersfield are league champions. And Jamie and I were wondering, how did Huddersfield find out they were league champions? I was kind of thinking it was a telegram, but eventually I kind of found out it was a little bit more mundane than that. Herbert Chapman is in the boardroom sitting next to a telephone, and he receives a call. I don't know who it's from, but giving the result of the Cardiff City. And they must have got the abacus out rather than the calculator, worked out the goal average and decided, yes, we are league champions for the first time.
It's the narrowest top tier title finish in the history of football. So going into it, Cardiff have a 0.05 advantage over Huddersfield. They come out of it with, as Phil said, 0.02. It's hairs on what's the saying? Cat's whiskers? I don't know. It's bloody narrow, is what I'm saying. It's incredible. And if in 1924 goal difference would have been the factor, they would have been level with 27 goals each plus 27, but it would have gone then to goals for, which would have been the deciding factor, and Cardiff would have won it by one goal. The Cardiff would have had that by one single goal. This is incredible. I mean, to play a 42-game Football League season and have two teams at the top that are so tightly matched, it seems unfair to award one of them the championship. And we've learned in other parts of the world, Spain and Italy in particular, even in the 60s, they were doing, in this scenario, they were doing playoffs. So, really? or they would introduce the head-to-head record between the two teams over that season. It just feels cruel on Cardiff City. Brilliant for Herbert Chapman and Huddersfield Town. Potentially super exciting, but I think the excitement is really one way because you don't know what's going on in the other game, as we're pointing out.
If it had gone to head-to-head record, Huddersfield would have won, wouldn't they?
They would have, yeah. I left that fact out, but I knew you had that covered.
There's no point fretting about it too much because Cardiff went on to, more than make up for that with their many league triumphs afterwards.
It's tough, isn't it? It's really tough. I mean, a little bit of foreshadowing as well. Arsenal, just to kind of mention Arsenal, throw them into the mix. They'd flirted with relegation all season and finished a point above the relegated Nottingham Forest. and continued to flirt relegation, I think, the following season. They were still getting bigger crowds than Huddersfield Town, though. Huddersfield, good day around Christmas, they get 30,000, but it averaged around the mid-teens, 15,000 or so. More than kind of their old chairman thought about having a 50,000 stadium. That's a long way off. You wonder whether kind of Chapman might be thinking, how far can I take Huddersfield after this?
I mean, that is a really interesting question, because he's definitely setting the team up for sustained success. He's not building for a season, he's building for a dynasty. And this is really the first football dynasty in the history of the game. I mean, quite happily be called out on that. But in terms of what Huddersfield are going to go on to achieve, which we can talk about clearly, I think Chapman is kind of laying the foundations, especially with making sure that the reserves and the youth team are playing in similar styles to the first team. So that consistency, he's just way ahead of his time. Or he's very lucky.
I suppose this is one of the things that differentiates Herbert Chapman and Huddersfield, and because they go on and repeat their success the following season, don't they?
Yeah, 1924, 1925. So the big question going into that was, could Huddersfield Town emulate Preston North End, Aston Villa, the Wednesday and Liverpool by retaining the title? I think Chapman went into the season pretty confident the team could retain the title. He didn't make that many changes in the summer of 24. He gave more chances to reserves and youth team players who'd both won their competitions the previous seasons. And he brought in a few kind of players, more local players. Joey Williams, an outside forward from Rotherham, went on to play 58 games, went on to join Arsenal, a bit more foreshadowing. And also brought in a more experienced goalkeeper as well, Billy Mercer. But, Huddersfield Town pretty much continued on from where they'd been at the end of the last season. They were unbeaten in their first 10 games before losing to Birmingham at the end of October. After losing 3 of the next 4 games, they soon recovered. They beat Sunderland 4-0, imagine that, and Burnley 5-0 during December, and losing just 1 of their last 27 games. So they regained the top spot on the 7th of February with a 4-1 win over Aston Villa, and really throughout the rest of the season they rarely lost it, with the final point that they needed gained on the 29th of April with a draw at Notts County.
It's domination, though. It's a different team to the one that was wrestling with Cardiff. I mean, they win the league by 2 points. 2 points for a win back in the day with West Brom. But they only lose 5 games. They score 69 goals. They concede just 28 goals. And this is at a time where football is questioning whether it is entertaining enough. The goal average for Huddersfield, bearing in mind when they won the championship the season before was 1.8, is now 2.4. So they're head and shoulders above everyone else. Only Bolton Wanderers have got a closer goal average in the 2s, and that's a 2.2 that season. So they really are a dominant force in a competitive league as well, because the top 5, I think, are totally different other than Huddersfield Town to the season before.
Disappointingly, they sort of really pushed the envelope out, and there are 7 goal scorers in this season, so it's like free scoring Huddersfield, this one.
Yeah. I think the 28 goals they conceded that season were, 5 fewer than the year before, but it was a record for the first division at that point for least goals conceded. They were a difficult team to get past.
Yeah, and football was becoming unsettled with the defensive nature of the game at this stage. And there were some questions going on in terms of what can we do to potentially change football so we can potentially increase the entertainment. And I think goals were related to entertainment. There's lots of things that you can entertain on a football pitch, but goals generally are going to give you that line of entertainment. So in 1925, experiments were conducted to potentially look at changing the offside law.
Okay, so I'm really going to be led by you on this. You're going to explain to me why they do make a change, and they explain how they change it, and you're also going to explain why there's suddenly a lot more goals.
Well, there's one particular player that's given credit for why the offside rule came into question, and that's a player who's playing for Newcastle United called Bill McCracken, not to be confused by Phil McCracken, the prank caller that Timo's Tavern from Bart Simpson. So he had mastered the art of the Tony Adams, basically. So this is an era where the offside law at the moment, there had to be 3 defenders in between the last attacker and the goal line. So you're looking at the goalkeeper and 2 defenders, essentially. That was the offside law. And Phil McCracken had mastered the art of just stepping up as the ball was played in a very kind of, George Graham back 4 style that would then put the attacker offside. So the flag's up, the attacker's offside, an opportunity to score a goal has been denied. So, I mean, even Vittorio Pozzo, the great Vittorio Pozzo, the Italian manager, loved this guy. He called him Mr. Offside or something like that. That's how notable Phil McCracken was. Not Phil McCracken, so Bill McCracken. Cheap jokes. So there was a debate in the FA. Okay, what can we do? And there were a couple of serious ideas put forward. One was, let's just change the offside rule from 3 players to 2 players. So instead of 3 players between the last attacker and the goal line, we'll have 2. So that reduces the number of players. That takes away potential or limits what Bill McCracken was doing because he hasn't got the coverage of 2 extra players. He's only got 1 extra players. Are you keeping up with me, Graham?
Yep, I'm there.
Okay. So reducing the offside rule from 3 players to 2 was one option. They also had the option, and Phil, you're going to love this because we talked about this with Vancouver Whitecaps. They talked about introducing a 40-yard line onto the football pitch whereby the attackers would only be offside once they enter that 40-yard zone. So the 40-yard line and the goal line, they will be offside. And so the FA generally played football matches with both ideas in the same match, 45 minutes with the 2 defenders, 45 minutes with the 40-yard line. The FA decided that the best solution was to have 2 players and not a 40-yard line, as we know, adopted in other parts of the football world in the late 1960s. So the offside law has changed. And God, I mean, have you got any questions before I possibly give you some statistics that will probably suggest that I personally think this is the earthquake in football. This is the biggest change in the history of the game, in my opinion. I've lost you, Graham. I'm the one wearing Senegal. I'm the one that's walking out, not you.
I still can't work out whether you are more likely to be caught offside if it's 3 or 2. I can't. In my head, I can't work out.
I think this is where the numbers come in because I think what happened was that initially most clubs were caught out by the change to the offside law. Matches became slightly more chaotic because defences were kind of caught high and the goals kind of surged. But there were a number of managers who got that sooner and adapted, which Chapman is one. But am I right about the more chaotic nature and the more goals were scored? It did have the effect the FA wanted.
In essence, I think that is right, Phil, and I totally go along with that. But then I looked at the average goals in the 5 seasons in the top English division prior to the rule change, and the average goals per game across those 5 seasons is 2.6, and it's fairly consistent as well. You can see each season it's around about the 2.6 mark. Then I looked at the 5 seasons after the offside rule had been changed and introduced, so reduced from 3 players to 2 players. The average goals for that 5 seasons is 3.8, and it's fairly consistent. So I can imagine there'd be chaos in the first couple of seasons, but that doesn't explain its continuation into seasons 3, 4, and 5. But it also doesn't explain the fact that the 5 seasons before that, the goal average was considerably less consistently. Hence my point. I think, yeah, you're right. There would have been some kind of chaos getting any rule change. We've seen it with the 8-second rule they brought in this year. I mean, you got referees proving that they can count to more than 6. It's brilliant. But nothing happens and it fades away. But yeah, so the chaos was there. But statistically, there's evidence to suggest this is the biggest thing that happened. It's happened in football, and a lot of big things that happened in football. When you think about the back pass rule, the introduction of substitutions and more substitutions. Now we've got 28 substitutions where you can change. The introduction of red and yellow cards. These are massive, massive rule and law changes in the game of football. I don't think there's anything bigger than this change in 1925. I think it blows football into a different place.
What about goalkeepers being able to handle the ball?
Yeah, good knowledge. Good knowledge. You're talking Sheffield rules. I like it, Graham. It's
That
almost
feels like that might be a game changer.
yeah, you
can use hands.
That is fair, but we're talking about the laws of the game as written by the FA and not the local rules, the Nottingham rules, the Sheffield rules, which would have been going on back then, where everything and anything was game.
You dug out some numbers, and one of the ones that definitely seems to back your theory on the one hand is Huddersfield themselves. So 24-25 season in winning the title, score 69, concede 28. And the following season, 25-26, they score 92 and concede 60, which is a massive change. But there may be another reason for the change, because Herbert Chapman isn't at Huddersfield anymore.
I wonder if this is the most famous advertisement for a job, at least in football, there's ever been. So on the 11th of May 1925, there's an advertisement placed in the Athletic News, and it goes, Arsenal Football Club is open to receive applications for the position of team manager. He must be fully experienced and possess the highest qualifications for the post, both as to ability and personal character. Gentlemen whose sole ability to build up a good side depends on the payment of heavy and exorbitant transfer fees need not apply. So that was in there. And you can imagine quite a few chairmen sticking that in a paper now, really, which is anything. You know, Jim Ratcliffe might possibly be kind of one who would very happily.
I think it's in I think it's on the Manchester Evening News website right now. I think that ad's there.
It was quite the context for all of this was that Arsenal were a kind of struggling club in the 1920s, but they had the foresight to kind of look for a more kind of visionary manager. Interestingly, in the previous season, when Huddersfield Town, winning the championship, had a home attendance averaging around 18,500, rising from the 5,000 a few years ago, but nonetheless still relatively small, particularly kind of compared to Arsenal, struggling towards the bottom of the first division, but at 30,000 in their ground. So there's kind of quite a significant difference in terms of potential. And I think that's what, although there was an advertisement, I think it's pretty clear very early on that the Arsenal board wanted Herbert Chapman. He'd already been kind of told of the impending advertisement by a friend of one of the directors, and he very quickly sent a message to the director, Sir Samuel Hillswood, his famous Hillwood family at Arsenal, that he saw Highbury as caught the place for me, and it's likely, despite having won the first division in the last 2 years, Chapman saw the potential in Arsenal. They could attract larger crowds than Huddersfield. He'd spent some time in the south. He'd been at kind of Northampton, of course. It could have been the potential of Arsenal. It might have been that Arsenal said they would double his salary to £2,000 a year. The highest paid manager in England. And we've kind of talked about a few managers over the year or two, such as kind of Revie, and Clough and others, who that would be part of their kind of bargaining power. But yeah, I guess that's potentially a kind of story for another day. But Chapman's time at Huddersfield is over.
And history goes on to suggest he makes the right decision, but not necessarily in the short term. But so Huddersfield Town, who are the reigning champions, twice champions, they have the opportunity to presumably become the first team ever to win 3 consecutive league titles. How do they go for it?
They kind of go for the continuity option and appoint Cecil Potter as their kind of new manager. He was known at the club already, being an assistant, and he was known as a steady, well-organised leader. He had Yorkshire roots, which probably helped in terms of the kind of the board. Low key but disciplined, I think. So he maintained Chapman's framework for the club rather than kind of reinventing it. the Huddersfield directors, I think, kind of believe the team was self-sustaining anyway. They had kind of senior leaders like Clem Stevenson and Tom Wilson. And they didn't, I think the board felt they didn't really need a kind of new big personality.
And how does it go for him?
It goes very well, actually. So that the board's confidence in Potter and in the team and the kind of continuity kind of taking on board and just incrementally developing what the format that Chapman had already put in place really kind of pays off. He continued with Chapman's system. Stevenson sitting in the middle as a de facto kind of on-field general. They don't quite canter to the championship, but not far off. They won their third consecutive title, 5 points clear of, interestingly, Arsenal. So Chapman's having an immediate impact. 42 games, 57 points for Huddersfield, so similar to previous seasons. Arsenal 5 points behind, but breathing down their necks. And again, and the big news, of course, is that Sunderland are in third with 48 points. So, yeah.
So Huddersfield make it an unprecedented 3 league titles in a row.
First time ever in English football history. You did say unprecedented, so I should be listening, really, shouldn't I?
I think I did say unprecedented.
Yeah, I realised that I should be paying more attention at that moment. And
there's an economy with my words sometimes, only sometimes.
Unlike me.
How long does Huddersfield's success? Is this the end of their golden period?
No, really. It was the end for Potter. Potter steps back and he's replaced at Huddersfield by Jack Chaplin. And the Huddersfield board are effectively doing as they've already done with Potter, replacing a manager with a former assistant to Chapman, a trainer and a scout as well, so he knew the club inside out. But this is remarkable. In 26-27, they were 5 points short, and in second place, they could have kind of won 4. They could have done what Man City took decades to do later, and remarkably, they fell short, but only just 5 points. Newcastle, interestingly, were the English champions in 1926-1927. And did you know that was the last time that Newcastle United were the English champions? I'll say that again, 1926-1927.
Yeah, Huddersfield were in quite an interesting sandwich there, finishing in second place, weren't they, Phil?
Yes.
Oh, did Sunderland get their customary third place?
Yeah.
Yeah, Huddersfield aren't the only consistent team in this period.
No, they came close again, I think, in 1928. Again, second, this time to Everton. And they're runners-up in the FA Cup. They lose 3-1 to Blackburn. And actually, if you kind of look forward, it's a little bit more inconsistent. So in 29, they're 16th. 30, they're 10th. Again, runners-up in the FA Cup, losing 2-0 to Arsenal. You might touch on that on another day. But generally, I think if you look at their performances up to the outbreak of the Second World War, I think they would be in that kind of Champions League type contention as we think about it today, finishing 4th, 5th, 6th. A few dips as you get closer to the Second World War. They were 19th in the final season before the outbreak of the Second World War, but still pretty kind of consistent, if not champions, then kind of closer to the top than the bottom.
Just to kind of to round the question, Graham, Huddersfield have won 3 Football League championships in their history. These are the 3. They've won 1 FA Cup in their history. That was in 21-22. But yeah, they do sustain top tier success for a while, and they get in the 1928, as Phil's mentioned, they get like the unwanted double. They're runners up in the league and they're runners up in the FA Cup.
The Michael Ballack double.
The Michael Ballack double, yeah. The Manchester United double in 1995 as well. Blackburn and Everton topped them. But other than that, they have won divisional championships after that, but we're talking the lower leagues in terms of what they've won. But this is really the high spot as a Huddersfield Town football team in terms of actually winning major things. And it's probably important to point out there's no European football. This, arguably right now, you could say, even though the FA didn't want to participate in organised world football. The English Football League is quite possibly the strongest league in the world, but it's hard to say that because we know there's good things going on in South America, in Argentina and Uruguay, and we know there's serious things going on in Austria and Hungary before the Second World War interrupts their incredible rise to glory.
And so you can see Chapman's legacy at Huddersfield continuing and what he's built there. But around this time, he's quite quickly gets into his work at Arsenal.
He certainly does. I think we touched on it just over 12, 13 months ago when we majored on the great Arsenal Stadium mystery, but it's 10 years later, within the decade, he's kind of, in the same way that he did at Huddersfield Town, he relatively slowly kind of built up, had some success in the FA Cup, and then started to convert that success into kind of league performances. And without spoiling any future episodes, Arsenal are obviously the next team who are able to kind of win 3 championships in a row, although, of course, unfortunately, not with Chapman at the helm for the final championship.
That sounds like a topic for a whole new podcast. And we will be back. We'll be back later in this series with Herbert Chapman at Arsenal, where we can, that gives me a little bit of time to come to terms with what the WM formation is. Well, that's for another time. We should get to the ranking of this side, Herbert Chapman's Huddersfield Town. As a reminder, we've got 5 categories of greatness. Right at the top of the tree, all-time greats, true greats, our second-tier category, touch of greatness, our mid-tier 1, edge of greatness, and then blink of greats. Go on, Jamie, where are you going with this one?
Yeah, there's lots to process in this. I'm going to try to recap it to justify my ranking, which will probably leave you mouth wide open. Herbert Chapman himself he's making coaching tactics, club-wide control, the job itself. And this is a completely new thing. So this is brand new. This is changing football in front of the world in terms of what it's going to become. And there's no other teams in the world that can really compete with what Huddersfield Town are doing. 3 league championships in a row, the first time, unprecedented, Graham, the first time that's happened. Then you've got that nail-biting championship with Cardiff, the first time that the English Football League Championship was decided on goal average. There's no European championships for Huddersfield to pit their wits against it. European football doesn't exist, so they're limited in terms of what they can do. So I think it's really hard to steer away because of the importance of football history attached to this team and this guy, Herbert Chapman. It's really hard to steer away from the top tier on this one as all-time greats.
Phil, are you going to argue against that?
I think Jamie said it earlier that Huddersfield, small mining town in West Yorkshire, in the mid-1920s, were certainly the best team in England, best team in the UK, probably the best team in Europe, and probably were the best team in the world. It's always difficult to kind of compare and contrast, but I think there's a good argument to be made about that. With Chapman, Huddersfield had won the FA Cup, consecutive league champions, and later with Potter, 3 times league champions for the first time that's ever been done. Chapman, it just strikes me as decades ahead of any other or most coaches. His emphasis on improved fitness, professionalism of the team, demanding higher standards in training, having a more balanced side, first through recruitment, but then giving each of the players clear roles. He was tactically way ahead of many of his rivals, if not all of his rivals. There was a very structured first team approach, and that was kind of backed up by some really kind of strong recruitment that took place, and the development of youth teams. He just strikes me as a particularly kind of modern manager, and we're kind of talking about 100 years ago. It's kind of incredible. So I agree with Jamie, yes. All-time great. Huddersfield.
The most obvious parallel has to be Brian Clough at Derby and Forest, doesn't it? 2 sides that we've done, 2 sort of great stories of fine achievements. And I think we maybe put Derby in the true greats category and Forest in the all-time greats. And I think that's because there's a you can make the differential between the two. So my question is, if Huddersfield Town are all-time greats, what on earth are Herbert Chapman's Arsenal?
Wow.
It's a question for another day.
Yeah.
In looking this up, I did kind of find, because I quite like that as a rationale, and then I saw that we put Alex Ferguson's Aberdeen and Alex Ferguson's Man United as all-time greats. So I've kind of broken my own system. So I can't really find any other reason to argue against it. You take a team from pretty much nowhere and achieve what he achieves. And the first side, admittedly not with him at the helm, for the last of them to win 3 consecutive titles. So I think we have to say Herbert Chapman's Huddersfield Town all-time greats.
Good decision.
I never like going there. Never like going with the
we've had a few.
greats.
We've had a few actually this season. Yeah, I mean,
I love the Bill McCracken stuff. I'm trying to think. I like the idea the first time he did it. The other guy was playing at the back with him because it's the 2-3-5 system at the time. Whether he said, "What on earth are you doing?" Suddenly, did McCracken say, or did it suddenly occur to him halfway through do you know what? I might just step up and put my arm up. What?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
It's something though when you become the cause of the football
rule
lawmakers to rewrite the rules. I mean, it's pretty amazing. I mean, what a legacy you have there.
It is quite impressive. I think after Luis Suarez, you're probably not allowed to bite people anymore.
I'm sure you're allowed to bite people in the first place.
But you're not. Someone should have told him.
He did it multiple times. I mean, there's a guy who should have had a snack before the game. The best, I love that though. I think there's the one on Chiellini when he bites him and then he complains to the ref that Chiellini's hurt his teeth.
You said that's the tightest title race decider on record. Anything else come close?
Yeah, there have been a few league tables decided, top tier tables decided on goal average, but the closest and the best I can find is the second division in 1949-50. Tottenham Hotspurs have won Division 2 and get promotion to the first division. Only 2 teams get promoted. Sheffield Wednesday, Sheffield United, and Southampton are all level on points. And the goal differential between Sheffield Wednesday, who get promoted, and Sheffield United, who finish in third, is 0.008. I mean, it is as close as you can get. They almost have identical records, which is incredible.
Excellent. Okay, well, we should wrap up there. Phil, thanks so much for taking us back through this story.
Yeah, my pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Learning more about Herbert Chapman in particular as well. He's quite a remarkable character. Would be nice to know a little bit more about what happened to him afterwards.
I think so. That's an idea for another episode. I like that. Yes, we will be back. Phil, you'll be back joining us with later in the season. We're not quite sure of the schedule, possibly even next week. Stranger things. Depending on when this one goes out.
That's the first time Phil's heard of that.
Jamie, thank you as ever.
Thank you, Graham. Brilliant stuff. Phil, amazing. I really enjoyed you taking us through the history of Herbert Chapman and Huddersfield Town. Great stuff. And I am looking forward to the next part. No, part 2 of a part 3 story.
2 of a 3-part.
But part 3 in terms of how the order we're telling these stories in. That makes sense, doesn't it?
Depending on whatever order these come out, we'll be back with the incredible Bayern Munich, the FC Hollywood team next time.